So, obviously there's been a lot of advancements, in transportation in the last couple of years with technology, both on trucks and I suspect in the investigative process, that's made a big difference for you and your team. Um, can you talk a little bit about the different technology that you use and how you use it, and whether it's tools you have or tools that are part of the carrier infrastructure, whether it's vehicle based or that help you in that investigation process?
Trucking is difficult. It's an essential industry that every corner of the nation depends on, even without knowing it. To the average consumer, the supply chain is magic, and sometimes a black hole. Products on store shelves, dinner on restaurant tables, packages on doorsteps. It's expected to be there on time, every time, and only recognized if there's a service failure. But how is a sausage made? Who's talking about the issues that matter to trucking companies?
Welcome to True North Truck Thought, or the Triple T Pod for short, a monthly podcast hosted by Scopelitas Transportation Consulting and brought to you by True North Companies. We're here to demystify the magic, address the black holes, and to talk trucking to the industry we love. Whether it's the latest research, upcoming laws and rules, safety issues and solutions, or practical discussions about real-life supply chain challenges, the Triple T Pod is here to help the most important industry in our country to navigate its greatest challenges and opportunities. We bring together some of the best and brightest experts to talk about and tackle some of the most pressing industry issues. So without further ado, I'm Steve Kepler.
And I'm Shawn Garney. Let's get trucking. The National Transportation Safety Board was created by the stroke of LBJ's pen in 1966 when it was included as an independent agency to the U.S. Department of Transportation. Its mission was to promote a higher level of safety through accident investigations. In 1974, NTSB was moved out of the U.S. DOT to increase its independence and ensure objectivity in its investigations. To date, the NTSB has investigated tens of thousands of accidents and issued more than 15,000 recommendations. Many of these incidents have been highway crashes involving large trucks. The recommendations that result often offer important insights and opportunities for motor carriers and our regulators to improve safety, which is a mission we all share. That's why we're honored that Shawn Currie, Senior Highway Accident Investigator with NTSB, has made some time in his busy schedule to sit down with us today. He's been with NTSB since 2015, following stints with the Maine State Police and the U.S. Department of Transportation, among others. Thanks, Shawn, for making time for us today.
You're welcome.
All right, and also joining us from the True North team is fierce driver advocate Bert Mayo. Bert is VP of Risk Solutions and a regular on the Triple T Pod, one of our favorites. If you're listening via a streaming service, you cannot see his beautiful Santa hat. He has decided today is his day to determine who's naughty or nice. So we're all going to be on our very best behavior as we talk about NTSB and how to improve safety. So thanks, everybody, for being here.
And Bert, for also those of you who don't know, Bert also doubles as Santa himself.
I do. I am Santa himself. Well, good morning and Merry Christmas, everyone. Thank you, Shawn, for being here. Thank you, Shawn, for an introduction, and good morning, Steve.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, thanks, Shawn, for joining us. We've had a long relationship, and you've been a very major safety advocate for many years. Maybe to kick things off, maybe start with when NTSB looks at crashes. What drives you in terms of the crashes you choose to investigate?
So, I mean, there's 40,000 some odd people that die in traffic crashes every year across the U.S. And we're a very small office. I think total, counting our management and our support staff in the Office of Highway Safety, I think we're at like 31 or 32 people. So we have to be very selective. We look at crashes or events that have 6 or more fatalities, new emerging technology type crashes, infrastructure failure type, the Philadelphia I-95 bridge that burnt down, that obviously affected a lot of people. We wanted to look at that to see if we could make some lessons learned out of that. Oh, what else? I mean, select hazmat crashes. We have a matrix. We don't always follow it because sometimes we just don't have the manpower to do what we'd like to do, but we do the best we can.
So it's kind of like if the crash meets X and X circumstances, then you'll consider it kind of based on manpower, based on ability to get there, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we don't really look at the ability to get there. It's usually like workload because we have 2 teams that do major investigations. So, like my team right now, we've got 3 that are in 3 major investigations that are in the workflow. So it becomes a time where if you've got too many that you're working on, you can't, you drag out the process and you take that safety message and, it's really effective a year and a half out, but 2.5 years out, how effective can that be? It's not fresh in people's mind anymore.
Yeah. So, you mentioned, 6 or more fatal, infrastructure, technology, and select hazmat. Hazmat obviously is CMVs are involved, but do CMVs take precedence in any of the investigations?
So unfortunately, well, they do for me because I'm one of 3 motor carrier investigators. There's only 3 of us. So that's pretty much what I do is look at companies and carriers. But I mean, we do passenger cars, trains, grade crossing stuff. Sometimes there's not a carrier involved, and sometimes I'll go to do there's a big group of witnesses. Somebody has to interview all of them. I'll go do that. But for the most part, I focus on motor carrier investigations.
And you work hand in glove and coordinate a lot with the state and local agencies too, right? So they're
that's really one of the unique things at the NTSB that Highway does is if you look at aviation, I mean, they're mandated in the CFR, they will investigate. And ours, they have primary jurisdiction on a lot of things. We have to coordinate ours with the police, state, local, county, whoever, because they have their own investigation to do. So we run a parallel investigation. They're looking at the criminal aspects and we're looking at the safety aspects. So without the cooperation of our state and local partners, we couldn't do what we do. And I can't forget our federal cousins over to FMCSA or PHMSA because, without them, we couldn't do it either.
Oh, man, going into the Christmas season, that cousin reference really kind of cuts both ways a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
Reminds me, I've got some gifts I got to get still.
Oh, man. Well, I really like this idea about hey, they're going after criminal and we're going after safety, right? It's local enforcement's responsibility to gotcha, but so then what's NTSB's responsibility, would you say? When you say we're going after safety, kind of what's your aim?
So I mean, we're a non-regulatory agency. Unlike, I always start off my interviews as, listen, I am a federal investigator. Here's my credentials. The only way you can get in trouble with me is if you lie or produce paperwork that you fake. There's a CFR for that. Unlike FMCSA, who can, give you an out of service order or give you a fine. That's not us. So in a way that really helps us out because what you tell us, people seem to be a little more giving of information. So that's pretty good. I found that very handy. They'll talk to us. They won't talk to the police because, we're not going to put anybody in jail. But yeah. Good.
So we talked about sort of why we select the crashes that we do. Once that crash has been, I'm just kind of wondering about the timeline, right? Okay, crash happens. Okay, there must be a quick conference call or something. You get your go team on the ground. We tell significant crashes in the trucking industry, right? You're gonna call counsel. Counsel's gonna head out there or send somebody out there to check out the scene. What's that like? What's that like first few hours in the NTSB space like?
It's probably just as hectic as it is for a carrier. We get the notification. We get them a bunch of different ways. They call it the ROC. I'll never get the acronym right, but I think it's the Response Operations
I've seen
Center.
that movie. Really good. Nicholas Cage.
No, it's not the same one, and it's not the ROC either. ROC.
Your continued interruptions, Shawn, are going to get you on the list, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Santa. So, we have a regional operations or the Response Operations Center at our headquarters in DC, and they have contractors in there 24/7, 365 that are monitoring. You go in there, and it's kind of cool. They got TV screens up all over and they're watching all the different news channels. Plus they get notifications from other agencies. So they'll get the notification, or one of the investigators will see something on their local news. It's happened down here in Tennessee. I've seen something on the local news and, pushed it up the food chain to our duty officer. We take turns being the duty officer, do it a rotation. We get it probably 2 or 3 times a year. And it's the duty officer's job to kind of go out and find out exactly what's going on if we can. Sometimes that's hard because, with small police agencies, the guy who's supposed to be calling you back could be the guy who's out there on scene trying to tame the chaos a little bit. So it's difficult there sometimes, but usually, within the first hour or two of the notification, we've got a snapshot of what happened. If there's a carrier involved, usually by then we've looked at their SMS scores and everything else and provided that information to our management team. Our management team evaluates that. There are certain things that require what's called a chair call. Obviously, the chair or the board members who are on call get on that call and they make a discussion. But it's really up to the director of highway if we're going to launch or not. If they decide to launch, we usually get either an email or a phone call that says, hey, by this time we've already known that something's going on because, telephone, telegraph, tell somebody that you work with, and sooner or later it's all around. So we'll have known where it is. We've already looked at what flights we could get, or we just haven't had to squeeze the trigger and book them. So once we get the flag goes up, we call our travel agency. They book our flights and our hotels and our rental cars, and off we go. Sometimes it's quick. Sometimes, depending on where you are, it's not quick to get there. Try to get there that same day if you can. If not, then the next day. Very rarely is everything still there. Usually it's been cleared off. Unless, when we came to Chattanooga in 2017, they had a school bus crash that killed some kids. They were able to divert everything around it, so they actually held the scene for us. So that was good to see everything, just where it came to rest. Recognizing you can't do that with some highways. If it's in the middle of I-95, they can't shut the whole thing down and wait 24 hours for us to show up. Except with the Philadelphia, where they burnt I-95 overpass down. That was still there when I got there.
Yeah, not much you can do with that one.
No.
Yeah, they did a great job fixing it, but there was nothing they could do that day. So and we do our best to get there. Usually we're a team of 5 or 6 investigators if it's a major launch. Could be down to 1 or 2 if it's a field launch. On those field launches, we really have a focus. We've looked at all kinds of different things. Sometimes you get there with a focus of, say, underride protection, and then you find out, well, the whole reason this happened is because it was in a construction zone that wasn't set up properly. So you have to be really flexible with that. So sometimes it starts out as something small and goes to something big, or sometimes it starts big and goes to something small. We jokingly wanted to have T-shirts made that says, "You don't know until you go." You can see it on TV. You can see a snapshot of it on CNN or Fox or whoever you're watching, and you'll be like, "Oh, this probably was this kind of crash." And then when you get there, you're like, "Nope, not at all.
Not even close."
Yeah.
So obviously there's been a lot of advancements, in transportation in the last couple of years with technology, both on trucks and I suspect in the investigative process, that's made a big difference for you and your team. Can you talk a little bit about the different technology that you use and how you use it, and whether it's tools you have or tools that are part of the carrier infrastructure, whether it's vehicle based or that help you in that investigation process?
Yeah, some of the things that have come out technology wise, obviously ELDs, because that data usually survives even if the days where trucks crash, sometimes they burn. Got a story about that later, but and that paper disappears. And if the driver also passes away, you lose a huge piece of that puzzle. With ELDs, that's usually pretty much there for you still. There's a lot of telematics data on trucks and trailers. We find new stuff every day. Like we're doing a crash now where they had a reefer trailer. It had where it was, when the doors were open, everything. Speed going down the road, because I guess you need that for a reefer trailer. But hey, it was great for us. And then, my personal favorite is the inward and outward camera systems, facing camera systems. The old adage, a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think a video is priceless, especially, when you get to see what happened and what happened before. So those, we use those a lot. And then there's always the components on the trucks, the event data recorders, and then there's so many different. I mean, I think Volvo's new one has like 13 different data boxes on it. So all that stuff, we're still, for anybody to say they're an expert in the technology that's on these things, it changes so often. I think we have a pretty good idea. We work with industry a lot through the party system, which sounds really fun, but isn't as fun as it sounds. It just we allow them as a party to the investigation. So, as we learn things, they have instant access to that. So, but they who better to know about the Acme brake system than Acme itself. So
Sure, yeah. So how long does it? I mean, you talked earlier about sort of the relevancy and wanting to make sure that you're relevant. How long does an investigation normally take from start? Because then I know there's usually preliminary findings that are published, and then maybe later final findings. So what's our timeline here?
Well, the timeline's usually, it depends on the product, 18 months to 2 years. And, I joke the company line is you only have one chance to get it right. But there are a lot of different steps in the reporting process. For instance, we'll go to a scene and we'll be there for a week or two. Before we leave, we compile field notes, which is like an abbreviated factual report of everything we've done to date. Some of them especially if you have all the information you need, that's pretty close to our final factual report. Obviously with motor carrier stuff, we get thousands of pages of documents sometimes, or sometimes we get none, which is actually harder than having thousands of pages of document. So I have to come back and review all that to make sure, I look at, management safety practices of the carrier. So I want to look at their manuals and their policies and their files, and are they following the CFR? Are they following their own policies? Are they following best practices? Is there a best practice? I mean, Steve and I had this talk not that long ago. I'm like, hey, have you ever heard of best practice for this? So we go back and do that within the couple 2 or 3 weeks. I think it's supposed to be 2 weeks. Don't quote me on that. I'm not a policy guru for us, but we have to have a preliminary report out, and that's usually very preliminary. It's basically this is what we saw, this is what we're working on. It'll have a picture, and it's usually a page or two long. And then the process starts. We're still doing follow-up interviews, and sometimes interviews make you go back and do more investigation. And at about a year, I know it goes from like 2 weeks to a year. There's a lot that goes on in there, but at a year, that's when we release the public docket. That'll have our factual reports in it, and we go through an extensive review process. It's almost maddening for us because there's so many different steps. Like I have to send it to, if I do a motor carrier report, I send it to the other 2 motor carrier investigators. We do a peer review. They make edit suggestions and send it back to me. And then I send it to the team that went, and we look through it and do the same thing. Then it comes back to me. I either make the edits or I don't. And then it goes to the investigator in charge, who's basically our on-scene supervisor there, and the project manager, and they do the same review process. Then we do an internal review. It's called a transition review, where I won't say an uninterested, but a somebody who wasn't involved in the investigation reviews all the reports in their totality to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. Because, if you've written reports before, sometimes you know what you're thinking and it doesn't make it to your fingers. So once the transition review happens, then we send it out for a technical review, which goes to our party members. For me, it would go to, the carrier if we made them a party. Like, I guess I won't talk about carrier names. So we'll say that 2 of the biggest carriers in America that carry packages and are very busy this time of year, we made them party members just because their businesses are so different than a normal trucking company. And they both have their own separate languages when you talk about widgets and such. So we made them party members. FMCSA is most always a party member when we do a commercial vehicle crash, unless it's an intrastate one, and then it's whoever the state members are. Also, the state or local police department would be, like the DPS or whoever, Public Utilities Commission in Ohio. Give them a shout out because we deal with them a lot lately, unfortunately, but they're great to work with. And they do a review, and they're just doing a factual review to make sure if I say, Kepler Trucking has been in business for 15 years and has 10 trucks, and, I sent it to Steve, who's CEO of Kepler Trucking, and he goes, no, you flip those numbers. So, it's stuff like that. Unfortunately, sometimes, we do live in a very litigious society. Corporate attorneys will get involved and try to do the word thing. We don't really allow that at the tech review. I mean, you can write your own what you think happened as a party member, party submission, but that's not the place for it. So then we get the tech review back, and it goes to the project manager. And the project manager is the one who takes all the factual and analytical reports and knits them together into the big report. So it seems like there's a big dead space there, but it's
there's like a lot that goes on. Yeah, there's a lot of people.
It's like the ducks on the placid pond. You don't see little feet going. There's a lot of feet going on.
Yeah, a lot of sausage being made. So
and in the process, Steve got promoted to CEO of his own trucking company. So that was pretty.
Not a very good company.
Yeah, and Bert, Bert's giving me insurance, and I'm on.
We're all ready to go.
Yeah. So you mentioned the party system, right? So you find that most of the parties, because obviously these things tend to be high visibility, right? So do you find the parties that generally be cooperative, whether the carriers or the federal, whoever's party, and any quick words of advice to someone that may have to be subject of an NTSB investigation?
So, yeah. So, I've been involved with really big carriers, and then I've been involved with carriers that are like one truck, one driver, you're the whole thing. I've had really, really good luck. I've met a lot of great people all across this country that are hauling stuff for all of us. They've been great. And I always try to start our conversation with, listen, something bad happened or I wouldn't be here. Let's learn from it so we can help prevent something like this from happening to someone else again. I've, knock on, it's not really wood, sorry, but knock on my fake wooden desk. I've never had anyone not cooperate. I've had different degrees of cooperation. I mean, we can do the subpoena process and everything else, but it just makes it harder for everybody, and it delays the process. If I was a carrier, I'd want to know if there were improvements I could possibly make so this didn't happen again tomorrow. If there's some flaw in the system, please tell me about it so I can correct it.
Well, that's good to know because the one thing that's great about this industry is I think people most often genuinely want to do the right thing, right? They want to learn and they want to get better. And it's good to hear that you're getting that cooperation.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Shawn. I don't want to be on the naughty list.
I don't think he had anything. Well, let's move on, I think, from, NTSB to some of the learning that I was hoping would happen here today, where we could talk about some of the findings, some of the things that you've been passionate about, Shawn, some of the recommendations that you made, and we'll just start with a general. Have you had any sort of memorable cases that have been both rewarding and challenging, or some recommendations that you found particularly interesting or important that you'd want to talk about?
Whew, that's a really good question. All the cases have been rewarding for different reasons. Either you've really met some great people, or you've made some positive safety impact. I really like it when you're doing an investigation and you're talking with a company, and I joke that I'm the sledgehammer guy. I'm not the ice pick guy. So if I'm going to have a recommendation, it's not going to be a surprise. I like it when you're doing an interview and you're talking about a process that the carrier does, and you see that their management team over there writing. And I always ask, I go, what are you writing? And they're like, things that we're going to change before you leave town. And I'm like, that's rewarding to me. Don't get me wrong. I love the fact that we make recommendations, and some of those take a while or forever. Sometimes it seems to get implemented. But I like when you look and you see those people who are really forward leaning and they want to make a positive safety change. That's really rewarding to me. As far as specifics, there's a couple right now that I really can't talk about because they're going. If you think back a few years ago, we had the Mount Pleasant investigation, and we had a problem with one of the trucks that was involved. It wasn't really causal to the crash, but we found out that one of the radar units on the forward collision avoidance systems it was throwing a fault code, and come to find out it was putting a warning light on the dash. But if anybody here has driven a truck or a fleet vehicle, you don't want to deadline your vehicle because you're going to get some hunk that's been sitting in the parking lot. So it was the busy season for a big carrier that delivers stuff this time of year. I think we found out the light had been on for like 6 months. So, but it's not a safety sensitive system. So it's nothing that's required by FMCSA or by NHTSA. So it wasn't required to be written up on a DVIR, which, you look at them one way, either there are a lot of unnecessary paperwork, or it's the first step to getting something fixed. If you write it up, someone's going to have to look at it and go, yeah, it's okay, or no, it's not. So we tried to get that. I tried to get that addressed a couple different ways. One was with FMCSA going, yeah, that's a system that needs to be on there. That didn't work out so well. So then we addressed it with the people who it was a lease vehicle. So it was one of the bigger lessors in America. So we addressed it with them. They came back within 5 months. They're like, yep, we think it's important. We changed our process. The process before was, if something was wrong with your vehicle, they put it into their system, and you, as the person who leased the vehicle, would have to go into their system to see if there's something wrong. Well, that's okay if you're small, but if you've got, say,
1,000 trucks,
you're probably not going to be doing that. So they changed their system. So instead of you looking in the system, if they found one of these faults, they would deadline the vehicle. The system would email you as the person who's responsible for it, and you could override their deadline. But I think in 3 months, they deadline like 3,700 vehicles across the country to get these fixed. So that was pretty good because, we never came out with a recommendation because they had already changed their practice. Before we even had our docket out, they had changed it. So that kind of gave me a warm, fuzzy feeling.
That's an industry win. That's not one. Yeah. That's not one carrier. That's like for everybody.
Yeah. Well, and the thing about that, to me, that's great, is the way you guys approached it. Because if you would have came out with a recommendation, it's kind of punitive. Like, okay, I'm already down. You're hammering me. But they took the corrective action, right? They
did a great job.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of their people because they're nationwide. I talked to different people, different places, and you could tell they were scrambling to figure it out. And one of the things that I try not to be, or I know we try not to be too prescriptive in our recommendations because industry's smart, right? This is what they do for a living. We just want to give them a goal, what they want to attain at the end. We don't want to tell them how to get there because they might already have, 80% of that there. They just need to have that last piece, as opposed to us, saying
To that point, you talked about that being kind of a technology maintenance issue, and maybe that's part of the focus. But how often do you come up with it being a human issue, a training issue, an age issue, or experience issue? Some of the harder things to identify, and certainly harder to correct.
I mean, we come up with, I'm not a human performance investigator. We have people that do that, but we come up with the human issue a lot, either distraction or unfortunately still fatigue. Distraction is, I hate to say distraction's killing us, but it is. Sometimes it's hard, especially if it's the person's phone or the person themselves aren't there to be queried. It's hard to know why. And, we've dealt, like the 3 crashes I have pending right now are all traffic queue crashes, where a commercial vehicle hit the back of a traffic queue or a traffic slowdown. No real visibility issues. So you have to wonder what was going on in there. Did they drop something? Were they, reaching back for something out of the back? Were they on their phone? Were they taking a nap? It's hard, and that human piece. I mean, humans are not perfect. We all know that. I don't know if technology is perfect. And from my laptop, you never know. It works when it wants to. So, that's the most disturbing thing, I think, is, one, carriers can be great. You can have the most, diligent hiring process and onboarding and training and the best management safety practices. And, you can have a really safe operation, but when it comes down to it, when those taillights go out the gate, it's all in the back of the driver. So if they have an issue or they have a problem, that's unfortunately, what can you do as the boss? You can't do anything because it's out there. And
On the distraction, and it's probably not even a question you want me to ask, but it feels like the elephant in the room today on all of my meetings and in what crash investigations we do. But distraction, it seems like it's an epidemic, and it's all goes to that device, right? I mean, is there anything being done? Is anything going to be done? Or is it just we're left to kind of, as an industry, you said the industry is really good at figuring things out, and I believe we are, but this is one we can't figure out, or we can't combat the motoring public who's going to not figure it out. They're going to continue to use it.
I have my own theory, and by no means is it the NTSB's theory that, remember back, well, some of us, Bert might not remember, back when seatbelts first became mandatory. Remember?
Thank you. You're going on the list. You're going on the good list.
You made it.
You made the good list.
Oh, good. The pressure's off now.
No pull for you.
But if you remember back when, there was a huge, and some of the videos, if you Google, seatbelt laws, when they were interviewing people about, they're going to make seatbelt use mandatory.
I've seen some of those recently.
It's like living in Nazi Germany. I can't believe you're doing this. It's like, but if you look, they started dealing with kids. They started talking about it, safety in kids. I remember me as a small child telling my parents, "Hey, you need to put your seatbelt on."
Yeah, me too.
So, I think if you go out to a restaurant now, you see people, nobody's talking, everybody's on their phone, including the 5-year-old. That's a babysitter. I think we need to change that. I think if you can get a certain age demographic, and teach them that it's wrong, then we can break that cycle. I think there's some that we'll never be able to teach. This is Shawn, not the NTSB. That they're addicted to it. Some people can't put that thing down. And it's unfortunate, and that you can have all the policies and laws about you're not supposed to do this, but I drive around all the time and see somebody with their hands-free in Tennessee, but everybody's still got their phone up to their ear.
Yeah, it's no doubt. I agree. It's an epidemic, and we could have a whole conversation about that because
I'll probably get in trouble if we do. So let's
let's move on.
So all right. So you talked about ELDs a little bit ago, right? And that being advent. So I was at the CVSA meeting a couple months ago, and in the driver committee, this issue came up about ELDs and ghost drivers and falsification, and a really passionate conversation. And I know, like FMCSA, you've seen them being more active on ELD enforcement and revocations. And I know you guys just recently, released a report where this became an issue. This was an issue with ELDs, and so maybe. And I know you guys. Can you talk a little bit about this? Kind of what you're seeing with ghost drivers and how we can address that. Kind of where FMCSA and what you're seeing there.
Yeah. So the case you're talking about, I think, is Williamsburg, Virginia. We had a truck load of beer driving on the interstate and rear-ended a slow-moving party bus. Had like 20 some odd people of it. There was a significant speed differential. I think the party bus was going, I can't remember the exact, I think it was going under 40 and the truck was going 65 or 70. It was going the speed limit. Had a forward-looking video, so you could see it was like there was no doubt that there was something there. It was late at night, early in the morning. Had lights on, so it wasn't a visibility issue, and was struck by the truck, injuring a bunch of people and killing some also. So we got involved, and obviously I send out a document request. I sent it to the carrier saying, hey, we want all your policies, we want the ELD information. So they send me the ELD information. We're looking at it, and it shows a co-driver. I'm like, well, there was no co-driver there. The driver had told the Virginia State Police that he had dropped his co-driver off at the truck stop, just probably, I think it was like 30 minutes up the road. Okay, so, we got what we got, so we started investigating, and one of the things I queried was the co-driver's logbooks too, right? Because you want to make sure everything matches up. Well, there was an anomaly there. If you looked at the crash driver's information, it was his name, his license number, and then there's a spot for what state, and it was AL for Alabama. Well, if you looked at the co-driver's login, it was his name, a license number that was exactly like the other license number, except it said AL at the beginning.
Oh, so that's how they got around that technical spec that requires you to have. Yeah.
So me being curious at that point, I asked for DQ files, because that's what we look for, driver qualification files, and I got applications for both drivers. Obviously, the crash driver wasn't talking to us at that point, but I was able to get a hold of the co-driver. He was quite surprised to find out that he was in a truck that, since he had been laid off from that company about 2 weeks before. And he said, I've never been in the truck with that guy. I've never driven over the road. I was a local driver for them, and they wanted me to go over the road, but I told them no, and that's why I got done. So.
Oh, so they were using an ex-employee's login information.
Yes.
Huh.
Well, I think they started as he was an employee. I think when they started using it, he was an employee.
Yeah.
He wasn't, on an ELD.
Yeah.
So, so FMCSA, I think, the Illinois division, and I started rooting through roadside inspections looking for co-drivers. And we found a bunch. Well, I think we found like 5, and we were able to talk to 4, and they wouldn't exactly say that's what happened, but they did tell us they'd never really driven with a co-driver. So it was, a couple of them told us how they were instructed to do it. They'd run out of hours. They would pull over at a truck stop or whatever. They would call a number, and then magically they'd have hours again. So it was unfortunate. I'm pretty sure from talking to the people in the office, they weren't aware of that, because this is a really, if you looked at the company's equipment in their office, they had a lot of things in place that you don't normally see in trucking. Like, it's not all that often to have an alignment rack for trucks in your garage, and you get them brand new and align them. I've never seen that.
Right.
But they were doing stuff like that. I know since then they've made a lot of changes. They were having their hours of service office that did their checks was overseas. They outsourced it, and they didn't really have a lot of training on the hours of service. Just someone told me this is how it's supposed to be, and at the time their in-house hours of service was mostly looking for form and manner stuff. Did you put that stuff you get roadside inspections for? Did you put the bill of lading number? Did you have this in there? That type of stuff. So it was unfortunate that it happened. They did make some changes after the fact. We did make a couple recommendations to them. We made a recommendation to FMCSA, trying to give them some more tools in their toolbox to have like a tracking record of if you go in as a carrier and you change license numbers or logins or whatever, there should be some kind of tracking history for that, so you know who did it. This ELD didn't have that because it's not a requirement, right? And we're hoping they make some changes, but unfortunately, when you start making CFR changes, you're talking glacial. It takes 4, 5, 10.
Yeah, I think the lesson to me from that, what I've taken from this conversation and this kind of, you can't just read the reports the ELD produces. You've got to do some forensic analysis.
Yeah, and
overall compliance program.
We're dealing with a case right now where another fairly sizable, I think they're 500 trucks. They have people that are looking at hours of service, and we found one of their drivers that was trying to think how much I can talk about this. That was using personal conveyance improperly. Not that happens. And if you look, there was a lot of compression. Times when he was fueling up, coincidentally, he was in the sleeper berth. He was getting half hour. So, and I'm like, do you guys use your, everybody's got a transpass or some type of widget.
Tolling something,
like,
yeah.
Do you use your electronic tolls? Never thought of that. Do you use do you reconcile your fuel receipts to see the times on those? And realizing that's a lot of work for a 500 truck company, but, spot check these people. And they're like, you know what? We never did, but we're going to start. And I'm like, well, good, because then you'll find these things. And, they had some interesting things, like they checked once a week for personal conveyance use. Now they have the ELD. I think they have their ELDs spitting out every day.
Reports.
So it's almost, at midnight, who used personal conveyance, and you're able to look at it.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, we do a lot of that with carriers, trying to teach them how to identify these, because sometimes, people are just trying to get some extra time. Drivers are as smart as carriers now in figuring out how to get some of that extra time, and so that spot checking is important, and it's really hard to, like you said, it's a lot of work to do it for every driver, but there are certainly indicators that we would point to that say, hey, this could be a problem. We should look at that a little bit more. Or I'm seeing a lot more of this random off-duty time in the middle of your day. Like, what's happening here, So really
I
good
think one of the
recommendations.
easiest ones, and we mentioned it to the carrier that had the ghost driver, is look at what they're getting paid. Is that what everybody else is getting paid? If you've got somebody that's, I'm throwing these numbers, I'm making them up. If you got somebody that's making $4,000 a week, and everybody else is making $1,500 a week, and they're supposed to be, there's obviously something there. So those are the people that you should go, and then start, who was it? Ronald Reagan, trust but verify.
I really like that, high earners. I think that's a really telling statistic, just because we are by nature generally a piece rate industry. That's how we pay. So.
If you're getting paid by the mile, and you're getting paid way more than anybody else, you're either speeding, cheating your hour. I mean, there's got to be something going on there, unless you found the portal to get you to where you're going and not do the time-space continuum thing. But
In which case, don't tell anybody about it, because that's your ticket to
They
success.
get crowded really quick.
Yeah, or you're transporting on Bert's sleigh in his reindeer.
Yeah, for sure.
So just what maybe two quick things of the recommendations you've made recently. Are there any that you're really passionate about, and are there some specific areas right now that you guys are paying attention to that you have any thoughts there, any advice to give to the carriers paying attention to this?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we're dealing, like I said, I've got some traffic queue crashes, and we're trying to figure out how we can get this, well, I won't say fixed because I don't think we can, but we can reduce the amount of them because they're really, I mean, you've got an 80,000 pound truck coming in at 60, 70 miles an hour. That's a lot of force. And, the size, if you do the math, it's never good for those people that aren't moving. So, one of the things we're working on right now, and I can't tell you the name of the cases, but we're looking at commercially available. I wrote it down so I wouldn't mess it up. Commercially available notification systems that are out there, and there's DriveWise and there's a bunch of other ones that DriveWise free. This is by no means a commercial for them, but they just happen to have one that I've seen and talked to them about. That it's a free app, and a lot of I think there's 20 states that are contributing through different data places that if there's a slowdown, they put a geofence up and it broadcasts it out saying, hey, congestion ahead, or caution, stop traffic, or right lane closed. If it's in the northbound lane, it doesn't tell the southbound lane. So it's not like you're going to get false positives. We're really looking at that. I think you're going to see probably in the next 8 months to a year, we're going to have I'm hoping if everything gets approved, we're going to have a series of progressive recommendations to industry or to FMCSA to, hey, make your client, to one of the big trucking like ATA or IDA, just make your clients know, let your clients know that this stuff is out there and it's free.
Yeah.
We've always been big proponents for that V2X technology stuff where everything's talking to vehicles. That's down the road. There's a gentleman from Ohio who told us this is CV2X. It's cellular vehicle to X. It's not V2X. The way I look at it, I know they've changed the definition recently, but is something that's in your vehicle. Like a component in your vehicle that's talking to other components. This is, as much as we hate to say it could be your phone, it could be your ELD, because they're connected cellularly. Yeah, I got that word right. They're connected via cell, and they're in vehicles. They're in almost every vehicle. So, what better way to do it? This is a now. This stuff is available now, and could potentially, prevent a crash, or at least get somebody to slow down enough where it's not as catastrophic as some of the stuff we've seen. If it gives you some warning.
Yeah, I think you see aspects of that in different parts of the industry that have been huge safety winners, like MVR monitoring services, right? As an example, so where there's proactive notification of the carrier, they want to do the right thing, right? And so proactively pushing that information so they can take action is great.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to. The nerd side of me really likes the whole, behind the scenes, how it does what it does, and how the messages are supposed to go out, and how they can set a fence, and then they can see how many vehicles have gone through the fence and what messages they're getting. And I have great hopes for that technology. We'll see, but so hopefully I answered your question before I went on my little tirade.
Yeah, no, all good. Just sticking with recommendations as we just have a few minutes left here. I think I know why this happens, but looking at your recommendations, seems like the majority of them most likely are sort of targeted at governmental agencies or regulatory agencies versus the industry at large. or specific carriers or whatever the case may be. Could you just talk a little bit about why that is? I'm guessing it's an impact thing, like how do we make the biggest impact with our recommendations, but just thought I'd toss it over.
Right. I mean, we could make recommendations to individual carriers that are involved in crashes. We could, I mean, almost every crash we could make a recommendation to the carrier to improve something. But we're only going to affect that carrier or somebody who reads it and goes, oh, maybe I ought to do that too. We do, I won't say disproportionately, but we do make a lot of recommendations to other federal agencies. That's because they're the ones who, like NHTSA, they're the ones who decide what goes into a safe vehicle. You know, what vehicle design stuff's there. FMCSA, they're the ones who set the regulations for, you know, hours of service, drug and alcohol, you know, all that. You know, and then federal highway, you know, road design, the MUC standards, AASHTO, all those things that I have to Google every time I read one of the reports. You know, all that civil engineering stuff. You know, they're the ones who do that. So, you know, that's one of the other things we look at. I don't just look at carriers. I look at, you know, state and federal oversight. Was it used properly? Did FMCSA, you know, miss something? Did they? Is it an issue with with a regulation, or is, you know, we've done some stuff with hazmat where, you know, they can give you a permission to do cargo tank recertifications, but if you read the rules, there's really no way for them to take that away if you're not a carrier.
Right.
So, you know, it's we look to try to give them more tools to do their job to improve safety. And we don't surprise them with it. We work with them. I always ask, is this something you guys are working on or had thought of, or you know, is it even possible?
You know, I was preparing for this podcast and I went back and I thought to myself, well, I better just go check their most wanted list, because I can remember as an advocate years ago, we'd see things on that most wanted list and we'd be like, yes, like, let's go get it, you know? And sometimes you'd see things year over year and you'd be like, this is clearly still like an important issue. And NTSB says we should get after it. And I don't want to get you any political hot water or anything else like that. I'm just wondering what happened to the most wanted list.
Well, I can get myself in hot water without your help.
I'm already on the naughty list, so for
yeah,
sure.
I know Santa's not bringing me anything this year. So yeah, we'd had the most wanted list since I think it was like 1990, and then I think it was last year.
Last year.
Last year.
Ever since COVID, everything's kind of blended together. I don't know if it's a year, 3 years. It's like a bear in hibernation. So yeah, the chair decided that we weren't going to have the most wanted list anymore. And if you Google why, you'll come up with her presentation. And basically, they changed it to safety priorities because they wanted it to be a little more positive. Because you hear the most wanted list, you think like the FBI or, you know, something bad.
Yeah.
And also, you know, be a little more compassionate to victims and victims' families of, you know, my whoever passed away in this crash, but it's not on the most wanted list, so it's obviously not important. That, you know, you kind of got to look at stuff like that, but they want to make it more of a positive thing. So it really hasn't changed what we do.
Oh yeah, I see it now on the website. It was like, because I went to the website and I went to most wanted list, and it's like, we don't do this anymore. You should point to the priorities, be like, we don't do this, but now we do this.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
It's fairly similar. You know, the thing with the 10 most wanted, or the most wanted list, I think it was like 10.
It was top 10,
we shared that with other modes, so you'd only have like a couple, 2 or 3 highway ones, and then some you'd be like, oh, well, we can kind of, if you squint really hard, you can make that one fit in highway.
Sure.
This way, we can look at problems in our specific mode and do the best we can to address them.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So, kind of a 2-part question as we're kind of closing in here. But number one, are there any kind of outstanding recommendations from your perspective that, if implemented, would be hugely impactful to the industry? And the second part is, do you have any tips you can offer based on your investigations that you can offer to carriers to help them, when they're dealing with, unfortunately, crashes?
Yeah, so good two-part question. The first part is that we have all kinds of open recommendations. I've been kind of picking away at the ones we kind of get, even though we have our SRC, our safety recommendations people, as we get assigned as subject matter experts, and if we have an industry contact, we work with them. So I've been kind of picking away at mine with CVSA. I got CVSA, so we were lucky. I reached over there, and once they got a good director, we were able to.
You're definitely on the naughty list now.
So no, we were able to close out some that they'd addressed. They just somehow we didn't ask them again to tell us what they did. So we got those closed out. We just did some with PHMSA and ATA. So, I can't answer that with one specific, geez, if we did this, it would save the world.
Yeah.
All of our recommendations are important because safety is important to all of us.
Oh, you should be promoted to chair.
Yeah.
That was very, very good.
I'm good. I like doing what I'm doing. Hopefully for another 7 to 9 years. So yeah, no. And as the second part, what was it?
Any tips you can offer?
Tips, yeah. This is a tough one because I've seen a lot of good things. I'm a process improvement person. I've got notebooks all over my office. Every time I do something, I take notes, or if I go to a meeting, I'm like, hey, how can we improve this? So every time I talk to carriers, I always pick up little tidbits of like, I really like how they do that, or boy, if they only knew about how this carrier was doing it. And I'm always like, hey, you should call. But I think this shouldn't be a shock to anybody in the commercial vehicle world. Have a good hiring process. Look at the people you're hiring. Trucking is risk management, right? Bert, are you an insurance guy?
Yeah. Yes. All it is, exactly.
Yeah. So it's all risk. How much as an owner are you willing to take? If you take a guy and you think, oh, I can rehabilitate him, I hope you can. Sometimes it doesn't work out, and if it doesn't work out, sometimes we have a chat. Hire the right people. Make sure that they're qualified, not just stop an application. I've seen a lot of applications with big holes in them, like 2-3 year holes.
Yeah.
You're like, what did you do for 2 or 3 years? So you start noodling around and going back to different. I always try to get 2 or 3 applications back and then start comparing them. I think I found one guy in 16 years worked for 22 different carriers.
Wow, that seems like a flag to me.
I would hope so.
The sad thing, I say this, and it's an indictment on our industry. He is working today somewhere.
Yeah, he probably is.
No, he's in jail somewhere.
Okay, this individual. Well, but I mean,
I didn't do it.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
to your point, he worked for 20 carriers in 16 years before he got stopped. I mean, that's
and if
I don't know how we address that.
If you looked at the crash. The carrier he worked with when he was at a crash, if you looked at his resume, for lack of a better term, or his background, you'd be like, that seems like a lot of carriers, but these dates really don't seem to match. There's like 6 months here, there's a couple months here. Where'd you go? I always ask, have you been to prison? Because that happens. Were you sick? No, I work for a company and it didn't work out. Well, why didn't you put it here? Well, because I didn't want to get a bad reference.
Because it didn't work out.
Didn't work out. And sometimes that happens. I'm not saying that everybody who does that is concealing something, but do a good background. I think MVRs are what, a 3-year look back? Does that sound right?
Depending on the state, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of a longer look back than that.
Me too.
If you can get it, go back as far as you can. We've seen a lot of people who've been good for a while, but then you look back and you're like, whoa.
What do they say? Don't hire your problems.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, if you have policies and should have policies and procedures, follow them. You'd be amazed how many people have great policy manuals, and you're like, did you just hire a consultant and have them put your name in there and never do anything with this? Or did you actually go through and cover these and decide which ones? If you have policies and hold people accountable, I've seen, at least 4 different crashes where if you read the policy manual, it says you will be fired if you do this.
Oh.
And then you see like a guy who's done this like a couple times this one and a couple times that one, and like, well, he's on his last leg.
Yeah. You want to give him
once
another
again,
chance.
it's risk management. If you've got something that says you're going to be fired for doing it and you don't, you own them. I think.
Yeah. How many last legs do we get? That's the question.
With the school bus crash in Chattanooga, the guy had some issues, and he had like 3 last legs, and I'm like, are these not cumulative? How many double secret probations can you have? And apparently not enough, because unfortunately he crashed that bus and killed those kids. And if they would have held him accountable back when he did the first really bad thing, he wouldn't have been there to do it. So. And then document. I think, we see a lot of cases where, they've got bad roadside inspections or they've got a speeding ticket, and you're like, well, did you talk to them about it? Yeah. Did you put it anywhere? No. Well, how do we know? I retired from the state police in Maine, and every time I had to talk to an employee, either really good or really bad, I always documented it, because as a supervisor or a manager, you kind of have to dot your I's and cross your T's to protect yourself and the company, just to make sure that you're addressing the issues. And it's not fair to the employee if you're not, counseling them or coaching them from their bad behavior. You're basically saying what you're doing is okay, and all the other people are looking at him or her who's a mess, going, wait a minute, how come they're okay and I'm over here, doing the right thing every day, and they're making more money because they're cheating the system? It's not right.
Yeah.
So, those are my words of wisdom.
There it is. Well, I really like this frame that like trucking is risk management, right? I mean, you can think about the dollars and cents, you can think about the operational challenges, but at base, ultimately, we're all trying to manage risk, and so where you come out depends on, I guess, where your threshold is. So. Shawn, I really appreciate your time today. I appreciate what you do and your field. We always read those reports with great interest, and we talk to a lot of carriers and find a lot of your recommendations make a lot of sense just compared to what we do on a daily basis. So folks like you that have an important megaphone really do a great service to the industry. So I just want to say thank you for that, and offer Steve and Bert an opportunity for a few last words, and of course you, Shawn, as well. Thanks again for being on the Triple T Pod.
Thanks. As always, I got to thank the real Santa Claus out there, all our truck drivers, men and women across this country delivering Christmas to you. Thank you very much. And all the dispatchers, ops, and maintenance people making it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Bert.
Yeah, and Shawn, I think from my perspective, the approach that you take to be collaborative, because no one knows all the answers, and so working together is going to make our whole industry better. And I think that, to me, that's one of the great values the NTSB brings is you have the bully pulpit, and some people don't like that, but at the end of the day, your mission is pure, and I think you definitely are making an impact, and just keep doing what you're doing. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks. So one of the reasons I really like working here is because we are independent. They let us. We jokingly chase rabbits all day long. We'll be like, oh, let's see where this goes. And you get to the end, you're like, that went nowhere. Let's start again. But we try to be as thorough as we can, and we try to respect the process and respect the people and that we deal with, because when we look at it, something horrible's happened or we wouldn't be there. And we just try to learn from it so everybody can learn from it and prevent it from happening again. So I appreciate the bully pulpit. I'm not that guy. This is, I think, my second podcast ever. So
all right.
Well, you did a good job.
Yeah, appreciate it.
You're
sure.
Thank you much.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it. Have a good holiday.
Yep.
You too.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this episode of True North Truck Thought. If If you enjoyed the topic today and want to tune in for future conversations here on the Triple T Pod, make sure to follow us. Also, please don't hesitate to let us know which topics you want us to cover in future episodes. Drop us a line in the comments section or send us an email to transportationnews@truenorthcompanies.com. Thanks and have a safe